Howdy, folks. Spencer here, and today I want to talk to you about the new Excelsior 2. The Excelsior 2 is a remodel of the Excelsior, and it's based on the skins that were shown in Star Trek Picard. Now, for any of you that have been around for a while, you know that the skin being based off something in one of the newer shows means that it's probably going to be a lockbox or promo ship, and there's no exception here for the Excelsior. This Excelsior 2 is a ship that is going to be going directly to the Infinity Lockbox, and you're going to be getting it as an option from your T6 ship box on December 6th. If you're on console, I would imagine you're going to be getting it in the Infinity Lockbox sometime later in December or early in 2023. Now, while this is a lockbox ship, I do want to mention that with it being released in 2022, it will be an option from the Event Campaign 5 box that you're going to be getting in 2023 with the next event campaign that they'll be starting up next year. So while it does suck that it is a lockbox ship, this is still a ship that you can freely obtain if you go through and do the event campaign in 2023. So let's take a look now at the stats, and this is an Intel heavy cruiser. There's not a ton of visuals for it, by the way. It's just these two pictures, so we'll see more on the visuals part next week. But this is an Intel heavy cruiser. It's got a 1.4 hull modifier, a shield modifier of 1.0. It's a 4-4 setup, and it cannot run cannons. Keep that in mind. So this is a 4-4 setup, same as any of the previous Excelsiors. I would really have loved to have seen a 5-3 here. Even if it couldn't run cannons, just 5-3 I think just offers a bit more flexibility and opens up the door for people wanting to run a dual beam bank setup. You could still run dual beam banks with this, but with the 4-4, it's really going to be leaning into the beam array playstyle. It's got 4 devices. For the bridge officer stations here, we have a Lieutenant Commander Tactical, a Commander Engineer with Intel, a Lieutenant Commander Science with Miracle Worker, and a Lieutenant Commander Universal. So this ship has just 4 bridge officer seats. This is not the first time that they have done this, but that does mean you are missing out on an SRO versus a comparable ship that has 5 bridge officers. So just keep in mind, it's only got 4 bridge officers. That's not the end of the world. There are some really good ships that have 4 bridge officers, and this is one of them. But just keep that in mind. Console-wise, we have 4 tactical, 4 engineering, and 3 science. Has a base turn rate of 9, an impulse modifier of 0.16, and an inertia rating of 40, and passives on it for plus 10 weapon and engine power. Also, being an Intel ship, it does have the gather intelligence mechanic, but it does not have a cloak at all. So it does not gain any sort of cloak innately on the ship. It does get the other Intel approach to like masking your signature with like a passive mask warp signatures system there, but that doesn't really do as much as a cloak does. So I want to take a look now at the stats of this ship, or like the bridge officer stats, and compare that to some other platforms out there. But before I do that, I do have to mention, if you're buying this ship, you're buying it for the console it has, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, the trait, or really the visuals of it. Like, you're buying this for the most part because it's an Excelsior. But when it comes to the stats here, the ship that this most closely compares to is the Legendary D7. And the Legendary D7 is a ship that is available right in the C-Store. And not only that, as we go through the stats here, you're going to see that the Legendary D7 is actually a better ship. So the Legendary D7 is the only other ship that has a Commander Intel and Lieutenant Commander Miracle Worker. It has the same hull modifier. It has a better shield modifier at 1.2. The mobility stats on the Legendary D7 are massively better than what we have on the Excelsior. Same power bonus. When we get over to the bridge officer seats, you see that they're very, very similar. So both the Excelsior and Legendary D7 have a Commander Engineer with Intel. Both have a Lieutenant Commander TAC. both have a Lieutenant Commander Universal. However, the Excelsior has shifted that Miracle Worker over to the science that it has. And this is where the difference between these two ships pops up. So on the Legendary D7, you have a Lieutenant Science and Ensign Universal. On the Excelsior, they got rid of that Ensign Universal, moved it into the Lieutenant Science to make a Lieutenant Commander Science, and then they moved the Miracle Worker seat over there. So very comparable ships stat-wise. Between these two layouts, I personally would prefer the Legendary D7, just because that's an extra SRO or a little bit more crit chance. And when we get to the weapons setup here, the Excelsior has a 4-4 setup, which really does limit it. It does not have the ability to run dual heavy cannons. Then we look at the Legendary D7. That is a 5-3, and it can run dual heavy cannons. In fact, the one that I've been flying, I've been running dual heavy cannons on it. Now, both ships have the same console setup, but the only other notable difference here is the Legendary D7 also has a battle cloak, whereas the Excelsior gets no cloak. So between the Excelsior and the D7, from a stats perspective, if you are wanting a ship that has a Commander Intel and Lieutenant Commander Miracle Worker seat, as expensive as the Legendary D7 is, that is going to be a better investment for you, because the Legendary D7 also is an account-wide unlock, whereas the Excelsior 2 here, as a lockbox ship, this is going to be per character, and the cost of this thing is going to be very high, especially given that it is a prominent ship from the series. So, yeah, the Legendary D7 from a stats point of view beats this quite massively, and while the stats on this are good, like the stats on this Excelsior 2 are perfectly fine. If you want to do a beam array setup, it will work very well. But if you want a ship that is more flexible and more capable, that has very similar stats, Legendary D7 is such a better option. However, many of you are still going to get the ship. I'm going to pick one up myself also for the other parts of the ship, most notably the console. So the console here is a universal, and it is the experimental power redirection. Activating this console grants the ship an unpredictable mix of Fire, Will 3, and Beam Overload 3, a large bonus to energy weapon damage that will scale up based on your total shield, engine, and aux power levels, and a suite of overloaded phaser attacks which will strike out at all nearby foes. As you kill foes, the amount of attacks that are going out from these overloaded phaser attacks, or from these overloaded phaser beam rays, is going to increase. So it scales up from 4 attacks up all the way to 14 as you kill more targets with the console. And the console has passives on it for energy weapon damage and Starship weapon amplification. So some solid passives there. We just need to see the numbers on it. And the actual tooltip for the clicky is it's giving you the damage boost based on your engine, shield, and aux power levels. It will randomly swap your ship between Beam Fire at Will 3 and Beam Overload 3. So that random aspect of it might annoy some people, but performance on it should be really good. And each second, it will have some auxiliary phaser beam rays that are firing Overload at will. So it's a combo of Beam Overload and Fire at Will, but only from the beam rays that are part of this console here. And that will randomly hit targets ranging from 4 attacks up to 14. So this console on paper looks to be insanely good, especially for a phaser build, a phaser beam ray build especially. But again, we need to wait and see what the actual performance is. So I really got to stress that quite a bit here. There are lots of things that have looked good on paper over the past couple of years that when we get them, they just suck. So I will be picking the ship up and doing a live stream on December 6th. If you want to stop by and see how the console's performing, the trait and all that, do make sure to stop by and see what my findings are. Now, the console here, like I said, it does look really good. And I really want to see how effective these auxiliary phaser beam arrays are that it has, especially being that the beam arrays that are part of this console are going to be firing Overload at Will 3. That looks very interesting to me. Now, the Starship Trait is Calculated Broadside. Upon activating, fire at will or any intelligence bridge officer ability. For a moderate duration, you will receive a boost to beam weapon damage. You will get a boost to damage resistance rating along your side arcs, and that will be doubled if you have Threatening Stance turned on. If you do not have Threatening Stance enabled, then it's going to lower your threat gen. So the console looks okay. Or I'm sorry, the trait looks okay, but the big thing is the console. The trait, I don't think most people would slot this unless the damage boost from it is really substantial. Um, if being Cat 1, especially if this isn't at least like 50 to 75% Cat 1, people probably just won't even slot the trait. But the console does look to be the highlight of the ship, and we're gonna have to wait and see how it performs. That's how this stuff always is. So again, if you want to see how the ship looks, with a bit more detail, I'll be doing a stream next week on December 6th where I take a look at the ship a bit closer. If you want to see how the console performs, the trait, make sure to stop by that stream. I'll probably be doing that around noon Central Time. So I'll set up that stream after I get this video done. I'll take the Excelsior picture here and use that as the backdrop for it. But yeah, if you have any questions, comments about the ship, feel free to leave them down below. I don't think it's a bad ship. I don't think it's a bad ship. It's just that the way that it's, available sucks, and, stats wise, it is a 4/4. It's a 4/4 that is limited to beam arrays or dual beam banks, basically. You could do cannons on it, single cannons and turrets. That never performs that well, though. It not being able to run dual cannons or dual heavies that's fine, but I do wish that it was a 5/3, because that would at least open the door up for a dual beam bank setup. So that's going to be it for me today. Again, thank you to all viewers and members for the continued support. More videos are coming soon and some more streams. But yeah, that's going to be it for now. Thank you for watching. See you guys next time.